Greetings, Mark Grang here, publisher of The Sun, and today my guest is Sarah Chadzynski. Sarah, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, Mark.
Sarah is a congressional candidate, a Democrat congressional candidate for District 1, which is our district. And I'm going to summarize things on who's doing what here. So
Absolutely.
Chris Pappas is our current congressperson, and he's running for Senate. I think everybody knows that. And on the Democrat side, there's Stephanie Shaheen, which people know. There's Maura Sullivan and other candidates who aren't as well known. Carly Benoit.
Bariant.
Thank you very much.
Mark, yeah.
Heath Howard, Bill Conlon, and Christian Urutaha. Arudia. Boy.
I know.
Tough one.
We got some good last names in this race.
Yeah, so tell us a couple minutes about yourself, your background.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a mom of 3. My background is in education. I'm a state certified teacher. I've been in nonprofit work for over 2 decades at this point. And, I'm very concerned about having representation that meets the needs of the people. We're a working class family. I'm not a
And where do you live?
career politician. We're down in Lyndesboro, New Hampshire right now, but a lot of my family is from Laconia, and I spend a lot of time in the Portsmouth area.
All right, because so what's the town again?
Lyndesboro, middle of nowhere.
I have never, believe it or not.
South Central. It's South Central.
But you're not in the district.
I am not running from in the district, correct.
So it's legal to do that, actually.
It is.
I did not know that, but so how does that, I guess from your perspective, it doesn't make any difference.
Well, so for me, it's really up to the people of the district to figure out who the candidate is to represent them. My roots are in District 1. We happen to land in Lyndesboro because that's where my husband's work is. He's a timber framer. He's also on the firefighting team there, department there. And I think right now, if that's the deciding factor for a leader to go in, then I think we're not focused on the right issues. But that's up to the voters, Mark. The voters need to decide, and all I can do is put myself out there and share who I am, share why I'm running, share why I care about this. I'm not a career politician. This was never on the to-do list or the bucket list of things to do.
So what prompted you to run then?
So for the last few years, I have been working as a volunteer. I was a pro bono executive director for an organization called Battalion, Ukraine's data battalion. When the full-scale invasion broke out, I felt really helpless watching a sovereign nation be invaded by an authoritarian regime, and tried to figure out how I could help. And what I could offer was education and my background in nonprofit management. And so we were documenting war crimes and atrocities happening on the front lines of Ukraine and getting those not only into the media, but in front of decision makers. So that meant all of Congress. And one of the silver linings, if you can even say that about COVID, is that all the members of the Hill were doing virtual meetings. So I was actually able to virtually bring in eyewitnesses to meet with congressional members. And we've met with every single office on the Hill so that they could hear what was going on. And so I was able to amplify the voices of people that are vulnerable, people that were being bombed, people that were having their home invaded. And through that work, I realized that we needed more coordination on a national level. So I was hearing from staffers that lots of people were speaking up for Ukraine. And there wasn't.
What was your interest in Ukraine? I think everybody has a general interest,
sure.
But is that now? And I'm going to ask. Let me overlay that question with this one. Your grandmother was a Holocaust victim?
Yes.
What does that mean?
So my grandmother is one of 800 people that survived the Łódź or Lodz ghetto in Poland. So when that ghetto was liquidated towards the end of the war, when the Nazis knew the Russians were coming to liberate, I use that term very loosely because it was out of the frying pan into the fire for my family, right? They escaped communism as well.
So your family's from where?
Poland.
Poland. So are you Jewish?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So keep going.
That's okay. So, I want to clarify, I'm 50% Jewish, 50% Irish Catholic. So I have all the guilt in the world.
There we go.
And all the stubbornness and determination. All right. So we've got it covered. We've got it covered. And I have that perspective on both sides of the coin there. So I think I was impacted by this because obviously half my family was killed. Our cousins have various wounds from shrapnel wounds. Another cousin lost her parents literally covering her running to safety during World War II. And my grandmother was forced to dig her own grave under Nazi order.
How old was she?
She was born in 1929, so you can do
like
the math
15,
of
16.
where
Yeah,
during the
yeah,
war she
yeah,
was.
yeah.
And she's still alive. She turns 97 in just a few months,
Cool.
Which is incredible. But that was a big factor for me, is knowing that people were being killed.
What do you think about the related to that? And there was a split between Pappas and Shaheen on supplying arms to Israel before the Gaza hostage exchange. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So, and Pappas they both wanted to put pressure on Israel. Pappas voted to continue supplying arms,
Yeah.
and Shaheen wanted to withhold it.
Yeah.
Where would you have fallen on that?
Well, I want to come to that because it's a complex situation of which I have some insight into,
Okay, sure.
right? Given
Go.
the family dynamics and history. But in terms of, how did I get here and running for Congress, I was doing this work and built a national coalition to advocate for Ukraine and bringing people from around the country to meet with congressional members. And so I know how much that matters. I know how much constituent voices matters in the halls of Congress, and I think that's really important. And doing that work, I was able to draft legislation at the federal level. I'm actually the only candidate who has done that, and not because I was paid. I wasn't appointed. I rolled my sleeves up to do the work as a volunteer, and my husband and I refurbished homes on nights and weekends to be able to make ends meet at home. We're not an independently wealthy family. Mm-hmm. So that was the background to the point of running, and then hearing that Chris Pappas was stepping down and being asked by friends and colleagues to consider running, which again hadn't been on the bucket list, right? So coming to this question about Israel and supplying arms and where we're at. So I have family on the ground in Israel that, and I have to be careful saying this, but has not felt safe in over a decade under the current leadership in Israel, right? And then I have supported, through my work with an organization called Med Global as their senior executive coordinator, I have supported teams on the ground, literally in the hospitals in Gaza. And when you have extremist leaders in place, it is always the people that suffer. And that's what we see happening right now. And so it's a very dynamic and delicate situation, and we need to get all the players at the table. I think the U.S. feels we have this kind of grandiose idea that we can come in and say something and that's how it's going to be. Well, we know how that worked in Afghanistan, and I think we can speak very directly and plainly about that. Mm-hmm. My husband spent 17 months in Afghanistan. So we have history to look at of our own actions. We need to bring the players to the table to have actual real solution and resolution there, and we need to build better relationships in the Middle East. And both the Jewish people and the Palestinian people have a right to sovereignty and a right to self-determination. And my greatest concern is that Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people.
Right.
So
what's the? I mean, you're not going to solve the Middle East issues in 30 seconds.
I wish we could.
I mean, you talked about the extreme leaders on both sides. People say Netanyahu is really trying to propagate the war to keep himself in power.
Yep.
And of course, Hamas is Hamas, and they have to be removed, which they've tried, right?
Right.
Do you see any hope?
I'm very, I think curious is the right word right now to see where things go with what's happening in Iran. So one of the things that I've talked to people who have seen revolutions and seen major changes in countries and governments more than I have. In our conversations, they've always said to me, you can have all the propaganda, right? You can have all the messaging, but what is always an undetermined factor is how people are actually going to behave. And the people of Iran are speaking up pretty loudly.
Now, Trump is, and of course, they've had protests every couple of years at different levels, and they get crushed. And so now President Trump is really threatening to support them, which I don't think Biden ever did so overtly, and to use military force. Yeah. So do you think we as a country should help the help that, change that regime that way, militarily?
Again, I think this is one of those situations where if we're working independently and not in a coordinated effort with international allies and other people, it's going to be a failed situation, even if we did intervene. We need to have all the players at the table to be able to make the change, you know, and we look at situations like, I will say it again, Afghanistan. We look at situations right now like Venezuela, which I'm sure we can circle back to later, where we've gone in and taken out a president, but we don't actually have a plan. And now we've created further destabilization in that area. So I haven't seen a comprehensive plan to what our president is offering to do in Iran or support how they're going to support the Iranian people other than to go in and cause more conflict. But that to me is not a plan.
But the strikes, whatever it was a few months ago when we took out their nuclear capability or some of it, I mean, that was considered risky but successful. And I think part of the reason why Iran is on its heels is because Israel's gone into Lebanon and bombing people everywhere, frankly. I mean, after Hezbollah or Hamas.
So I think when we're looking at the strikes that we did on Iran, I don't think that they were as successful in the physical capacity. I think they were successful in terms of messaging. Okay. So physical capacity, we didn't do that much damage.
Right.
For better or for worse, we can analyze that later.
Right.
But in terms of messaging, it gave a very clear message. Yet again, you know, I'm very concerned about the precedent that we're setting on an international scale of where are we in terms of international law?
Yeah, no,
you know, and how are we being compliant? How are we working with our allies? Because, you know, operating as a giant on our own is not a long-term solution.
Yeah. So let's bring it back, speaking of home, let's bring it back home. And so if you were elected, what committees? What are you interested in? You're obviously interested in this stuff, but what committees, if you could wave a magic wand, committees would you sit on?
Yeah, so there are a couple different committees that I would like to at least get on. Yes, of course, one is, you know, House Foreign Affairs Committee for sure in terms of how that impacts internationally what's happening here at home. However, I'm also incredibly concerned about what's happening here at home. So being on committees to help impact healthcare, and there's multiple committees to be on for these various things, to be able to get healthcare reform passed, to be able to get real immigration reform passed, to be able to close loopholes in policy that is allowing private equity firms to buy up housing across the nation. This was meant for, you know, people like, you know, me and my husband and family to put investment of our retirement into homes, and now it's being used on a broad scale. That's not the intent of the legislation. So I would like to be on committees that impact those.
And what about, I mean, being a congressperson, it's a lot about constituent service. So if you had how much time would you spend as a percentage on constituent service, or what do you feel about constituent service?
This is such an important question for me, Mark, and something that goes right to the heart of my campaign. So if you go to my website, sarahc603.com, at the top you see a banner that says, People over Politics, Party, and Profit. And what we have seen is a departure from focusing on people. This is not a career. This is a role of service to people. And people need to have access to their leaders. People need to have access and communication, open communication. And I have spent a huge amount of time traveling around District 1, being with people. And that's something I love.
What are you hearing on the ground?
I'm hearing that people are really concerned.
Now you're talking to people who are probably on the Democratic side.
So I was actually going to go a step further.
Okay.
I was at a House event the other night, and it was predominantly independents. Few Republicans, or former Republicans as they're saying now, but still feel like they identify as Republican, but don't see that in the current party. So I have Republicans who are donating to my campaign and supporting me as a candidate because they want to see someone who can actually get the work done, who can get the job done. And I have the skill sets and the background and the relationships that I've built over the last 4 years on the ground in DC to be able to deliver. And I have the perspective of being a working class mom who wants to be of service. You know, I was never in any armed service in this nation, and I haven't been able to give to our country in that way. And I see this as an opportunity that I can give skill sets that I have to be of service to the people of District 1, to the people of New Hampshire, and to our country.
And going back to the question, you're not avoiding it by any
No,
means,
no,
but
I
what are you
have-
hearing?
yeah.
What are you hearing on the ground?
So what I'm hearing on the ground is that people are concerned about where we are. People feel like we are seeing ripples of history, and they're very uncomfortable with that. People want change. They want immigration reform. They want to deal with some of these key issues, but they don't want Gestapo-style tactics used in our communities. And I say that strongly. My family was killed by members of the Gestapo. Okay, I don't say this loosely. This is concerning behavior, and I have actually called on Congress to put legislation in place to outlaw Gestapo-style behavior. So that means smashing car windows. That means going door to door. That means not having a warrant. That means hiding your face and your identity. Mark, as a mother, if I was driving at night and an unmarked vehicle was telling me to pull over, and I have my kids in the back, I have a 13-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 5, almost 6-year-old, I'm not pulling over. That is an unmarked vehicle without identification. That's incredibly concerning to me and my safety and my children's safety. So I'm hearing that people are really coming together across the spectrum, very concerned about what they're seeing in this country, very concerned about the fact that, and I'll say this very directly, there are people that voted this administration in, right? And they voted for change. They voted for economic reform. They voted for bringing law and order back in. And what they're seeing is the opposite of that. And they're seeing this administration not be able to follow through with the promises that were made. And that's upsetting people. And they're very concerned about where we're going and being able to have a future either for themselves, for their kids, for their grandkids. Basic stuff like healthcare.
I know people, I think a lot of people, even Republicans, are concerned about the tactics for sure, the masked guys who are in tactical outfits and all that. But I think you've advocated just to get rid of ICE, right? Because ICE, ICE has been around forever, I think.
Nope.
When
2003.
Okay, so it's been around since Obama, but Obama, as we know, was considered the deportation in chief, right?
Yeah.
So, but I don't think most people even knew about ICE at that time, and the administration in Obama deported millions.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we get into is, in those questions, I want to make it clear, I have held all of our Democratic leaders accountable. I held our national security team accountable under the Biden administration, especially with Ukraine stuff. I met with them and would push on and negotiate things that I thought really needed to be happening that weren't happening.
So just in a nutshell, though, because we could talk about Ukraine forever,
Absolutely.
But do you mean not having and providing more arms to Ukraine?
Yeah, the slow roll was not helpful for anybody. I believe we should have given Ukraine the firing power that it needed. I think being afraid of Putin has only emboldened him, and that's a bigger conversation we could have for sure.
Right.
But to bring it back home to here in terms of ICE and abolishing ICE. Abolishing is an interesting word, right? Like ICE needs to be majorly reformed. And at this current point in time, and I was just with a group of youth before coming in here, and I said, okay, what's your read on ICE? Is it positive or negative? Whether you agree with what they're doing or not, is your, what is your perception? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle, right? And most of it was thumbs down. So there's a very negative relationship with ICE at this moment. And so I do not believe it can continue in its current format, under its current name. Yes, we need immigration reform. Can you imagine, Mark, what we could do with $170 billion into our immigration courts that are completely backlogged and actually uphold due process, which is the foundation of our country? And no, it doesn't mean open borders, and I think this is the pendulum swing that we have, is that we need to actually come back to the table with real solutions that make a difference. And to me, right now, ICE is not making $170 billion of our tax dollars worth of difference to be worth it to me.
Good enough.
And that's my concern.
Just switching around for subjects. Before we went on the air, talking about Airbnb, and that's controversial around here. We're a tourist community. What are your thoughts on Airbnbs? I mean, some people say if we get rid of them, of course, we know that people are concerned about residential neighborhoods, commercial, basically Airbnbs in residential neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Other people say, hey, if we didn't have Airbnbs, it would help solve the housing crisis, the shortage. Mm-hmm. And realtors would say, no way, because most of these homes are second homes and they wouldn't be bought by locals anyway.
Yeah, so I think looking at that from a perspective of comprehensive housing reform is really important. You know, we need more housing, period, right? Eliminating Airbnb is not going to solve our housing crisis. But I do think that we need to take into account and do some studies and assessment of how it is impacting the community. How, yes, maybe these are second homes, but also it sets the bar for rental prices for people that live here. So I think there is some complexity there where, you know, maybe people wouldn't be buying those specific homes, but it does actually impact the market across the board.
There are no magic bullets for, you know,
No.
and of course the state of New Hampshire's passed some legislation last year, more ADUs and trying to relax the local zoning. Any just general thoughts of how we solve, I mean, we could have more federal money to subsidize housing. What's your instinct about this?
So I think we need to make a comprehensive plan, and I've been speaking with and have a call coming up with people who know more than I do. And I think one of the important things of being a leader is saying that you're not an expert in everything. I'm not an expert in housing, but there are a lot of people that have worked in Section 8 housing, have worked in critical housing for our seniors, who have a lot of insight onto where the problems are. And so we don't have a comprehensive policy put out yet, but I expect to have one in the next month or two that is something that we can actually put in place that will make a difference. That's not a pie in the sky vision that we can't follow through on.
Good enough. So I know I'm jumping around.
Please,
so,
that's okay,
I mean,
Mark.
the transgender issue was a hot button, obviously, last election, and I think it's kind of, and I bring it up because just today they were arguing in front of the Supreme Court about it.
Yeah.
And it looks like, I mean, just the tone of the questions is that they're probably going to uphold the bans on transgenders in girls' sports. And in New Hampshire, we do have I think it passed last year. About not banning basically transgenders in girls' sports, except for a couple of carve-outs. I think there were two. The court decision to allow person A and person B, for whatever reason. What's your thoughts on?
You know, I grew up playing field hockey, Mark, and I would love it when there was a guy playing on the other team because we would just go hard, and that would be even further motivation for us to win that game. But what I want to bring down is that we've gotten locked into culture wars, and that hasn't actually met the needs of the people. And so, for example, I was chatting with someone in Derry, New Hampshire, and made it clear to me he was a straight Republican ticket voter. And I said, that's okay. Let's have a conversation. I said, I'm never going to convince you to believe the things that I believe. You're not going to convince me to believe the things that you believe, and that's okay. That's the beauty of our country, and that's what I will fight for, is your rights to be able to believe what you believe, to practice the religion you'd like to practice, to parent and raise your kids the way you want to parent. You know, and this touches on the transgender issue, so allow me to keep going on this. So, you know, I said, listen, I'm a teacher. I know that staff bathrooms are open gender. My eldest is transgender. I just want them to have a safe place to go. Yes, I just want them to have a safe place to go to the bathroom in school. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Doesn't mean we have to have a discussion about it. Let's take staff bathrooms in a few places in the school, make them open gender, and then let's move on and get everybody health care. Because that impacts everybody. And so instead of actually talking about real solutions to problems that impact everybody, we're getting stuck on discussions of belief and culture wars. And this is a problem. This is a big problem. And you know what, Mark? That gentleman who's a straight Republican ticket voter, he stood up and he shook my hand and he said, you know what, Sarah, you may be the only Democrat that gets my vote. I'm not going to get hung up on it. We have bigger problems to look at right now. We have a massive immigration issue in terms of ICE and how things are impacting our community, asking our local law enforcement to violate their oath to uphold the Constitution and their social contract with their communities. We have a healthcare crisis. I mean, I was on the marketplace at 20 to midnight on December 31st, you know, purchasing my health care for this year because on our family plan, it's gone up to $2,600 a month. That's over $31,000 a year, right? We have a housing crisis and we have a massive affordability crisis. These are the things we need to be talking about.
Fair enough. We only have a couple minutes left.
Okay.
So two more questions.
Sure.
One, I mean, you've got a tough, you know, you have some tough competitors. I mean, name
Absolutely.
recognition is a tough. So how do you How are you presenting yourself outside of money from the rest of the crowd?
So I think the key thing here for me, and specifically why I'm running, Mark, is I am not a career politician, right? I'm someone who cares a lot about our community. I have proven myself by rolling up my sleeves to get work done, to figure out the ropes in DC when nothing is business as usual. I know how to get things done. You know, other candidates might go in there as a freshman and they're not going to know the lay of the land. They're not going to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody that was at a certain desk at State Department, but that department no longer exists. I know where those people are. I'm able to get in and work immediately on day one on the ground to get things done. And I want to make sure that we bring it down to having someone who truly understands what it's like to be an everyday Granite Stater. You know, I was a single mom with my eldest when my first marriage fell out from under me, and know what it's like to go and apply for SNAP benefits, even as a full-time teacher. I still needed that help to be a bridge to feed my kid. I understand how hard it is to juggle working, paying the electric bill, figuring out how you're going to feed your family. And yet I have the know-how, the relationships, and the ability to actually deliver. And so I personally cannot bow out of this. I cannot turn away when I know I have these skills and this ability to offer to you, to the people of this district, and to the state to be able to make a difference right now when we need it more than ever.
Sarah, very impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Okay, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.